The Fresh Toones music show is underwritten by the Animation Workshop at Animated Studio, providing animation instruction since 1993. Please visit their website at animatedstudio.com.
Tell me your story for you're gone.
Welcome to the Fresh Toones music show. My name is Dave Puls. And on the first Friday of every month, I like to do a show that encourages us all to tell our story and share it with our friends and neighbors and maybe a larger audience if it goes that way. Not too long ago, I wrote a book of short stories about my childhood, and some of them have some pretty humorous parts to them. Writing the book certainly helped me to reevaluate my upbringing and some of my beliefs and rethinking how I grew to be the person that I am now. So it was pretty interesting. It kind of developed out of writing in a journal for many years. I tried to do it as often as I could, but that helped me to write things out and think things out. So if you get a chance, you might want to start a journal to encourage you to write. And at some point you might feel like writing a story that you can share with other folks. So let's get started, and I'll share this story about the Junkman's Apprentice. It's a story based on my memories from when I was 13 years old in 1965. I was facing my first major life crisis, and now it was time to confront it. Here I was, soon to be 13 years old, and I didn't even have a guitar yet. In 1964, the Beatles had taken America by storm, and my three closest friends already had guitars and were strumming away to She Loves You. My birthday was not far off, and I had asked for a small practice guitar as a gift from my parents. The price was only $30, not like my friends that cost more than $50. I felt like I was being quite reasonable by asking for a dinky practice guitar to start with, but you know how parents can be. They just don't get it sometimes. For my dad, who worked 2 jobs and a lot of overtime, $30 was way too much for each of us 4 kids to get on our birthday. $30 was equal to about $230 in 2017. At the time, I didn't understand the great injustice being done to me when my friends had all gotten guitars from their parents. I began to realize at this young age how life was not always just. My parents, who had lived through the Depression, knew how important this was for me, and they came up with a possible solution. I was all smiles and really excited to hear just what the plan was. They had both agreed that if I came up with half of the amount, they would match it with this year's birthday gift. My fantasy of one day becoming a rock star was in one swipe dashed on the rocks of impossible demands. How was I going to get close to earning $15? In those days, an allowance was maybe 25 cents a week, and even if I could cut a lawn or 2 a week for that amount, it was going to take a long time to save up enough. I wasn't old enough to legally work in a business yet, but I sure wished at the time that I could have. The 60s weren't like the good old days when my parents grew up. There weren't all those child labor laws. Yeah, those were the good old days. I was always pretty good with numbers, and I figured that if I could work like the kids back then and earn 10 cents an hour, I could easily have earned $1 a day in the normal 10-hour workday. Just think of it. In a matter of a few weeks, I could have earned the full $15. Later on in life, I was to learn that those children were working to help their family survive, not to buy superfluous things. Times had changed, and now I was going to have to find some other way of making the necessary cash. As I sat moping on our front steps, a big rusty brown pickup with an outrageously loud muffler pulled into the driveway next to ours. It was our elderly neighbor's son, whose name was also David. The bed of his truck was stacked 5 feet high with every variety of scrap metal that you could think of. It was all held in place with jammed-in pipes on one side and rusty bed spring on the other. Everything looked like it was ready to spill out at any moment. It certainly took my mind off my problem when David Batty, who I knew a little, came over and asked me if I wanted to make some money. I was up and off those steps in a hurry and said, "Sure." He had missed making it to the junkyard before closing time, and before making a delivery the next morning, he needed to pack things better. He told me that he'd give me a quarter for standing at the side of the truck while he handed me pieces to set on the lawn. I wasn't going to make the big bucks that I needed, but it was better than sitting around moping. We worked well together, and it didn't take long to repack it all. When we were done, he asked me if I'd like to have a regular job. He told me that it would pay 50 cents for a couple of hours of riding around with him in the morning picking up scrap metal. I told him that would be great and that I could begin next week when summer vacation started. My mind was spinning doing the math for how many days it would take to make the $15. It would take 30 days. That was a lot of days, but I wanted the guitar more than anything. There were 2 days before my birthday, and now I had good news from my parents. First, I was going to have to get their permission to work as a junkman, but they knew David, and I was confident they would say yes. My dad spoke with him to be sure that I would be safe, and he seemed convinced that I would be. My dad found some heavy gloves for me to wear and then reminded me that I needed to find out what my hours would be. I caught David just as he was pulling out and asked him what my hours would be. He told me that it would be only 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, and it would be from 6 a.m. to 8:15 a.m. My mind screamed, "What?" But I kept my composure on the outside. He told me that he'd pick me up at 6 a.m. sharp, and to not be late because we had to beat the other junkmen before they got the good stuff. You know, refrigerators, discarded furnaces, and in general any other big and heavy junk metal. I gulped as David pulled away with his muffler backfiring and the rusty sides of his truck rattling. On my birthday, I figured out that because I practically had money in the bank, I could get forwarded the whole amount that I needed for the guitar. My parents didn't quite see it the same way and said that the deal still stood, and when I had earned my half of the money, they would take me across town to purchase the guitar. Tuesday morning came around quickly, especially since it was 5:30 a.m. when my alarm clock went off. I hit the snooze button and rolled over for just a minute. Well, that minute turned into 20 minutes before I pried one eye open to see the clock that now read 5:50. I jumped up and hurried to the bathroom, took a piss, rinsed my mouth out with some water, threw on some old clothes, grabbed a piece of bread, and then ran out the front door just as the noisy junk truck was coming down the street. Then I realized that I had forgotten the work gloves and dashed back into the house. As I came flying out with the screen door slamming behind me, the truck pulled up with its squealing brakes announcing its arrival. If there was anyone still asleep on my street after that, I would have been surprised. It was like a loud, rattling tank had just rolled down our street at 6 a.m., and no amount of pillows over one's head could block it out. I didn't care, though, because I was starting my first real job. I might have been half asleep, but I felt pretty proud of myself sitting up there in the shotgun seat, setting out on a new adventure. By 6:30, I wasn't as excited as when we had started out. It was hard work, and we were really moving at a fast pace. As we rode around, I found out that this was David's second job, and that he had a full-time job that he started at 8:30. Helping him get those refrigerators up into the truck was especially difficult, and if my father ever saw what we went through sometimes, I'm sure he would have put an end to my job. Luckily, people didn't fear injury or getting sued back then, so I could safely keep my job. David liked how hard I worked, and each day he gave me my 50 cents. Sometimes on Friday, if it was an extra good haul for the week, he'd throw an extra quarter. After 3 weeks, I had saved $6.50, so I was almost halfway there. I was making an average about 22 cents an hour, but still that was more than twice what kids made during the Depression. Besides, my savings were adding up. In about 4 more weeks, I would have enough. Later, I would find out that the minimum wage was $1.15 an hour, but that was for legal work. I was underage, so I was glad to have my job. I could see the light at the end of the junkyard, and I wasn't going to complain about the hard work now. That was a good thing because David offered me a chance to make an extra $2 on each of the next 2 Saturdays. I was quick to ask him what the hours would be and what I'd be doing. He told me that it would only be from 8 a.m. until about 1 o'clock and that he'd buy me lunch. All we'd be doing is hauling things out to the curb from his parents' backyard. It sounded pretty good, and beside my hourly pay almost doubled, there's no way that I could go wrong with this deal, right? It turned out that we'd be tearing down his parents' ancient barn and lugging it and everything inside it piece by piece out to the curb. When I first heard this and looked up at the gigantic 2-story barn, I thought he was kidding. He wasn't. We got to work, and by the end of the first Saturday, we had 40 years of accumulation emptied out and moved to the curb. For the next 2 Saturdays, we tore down that dilapidated barn, board by board, so I got even more overtime. At the end of 6 weeks, and the beginning of the new school year in sight, I had more than the $15 that I needed. With that last Saturday's work done and 6 feet of barn debris stacked at the curb, I collected my last paycheck and ran home to ask my parents to take me to the music store. They hadn't really planned on taking me at 2 p.m. on Saturday, but a deal was a deal, and they knew how hard I had worked to get to this point. I was pretty proud of my little dinky folk guitar, and I rushed to show it to my friends. They were less than impressed and told me that that kind of guitar didn't fit in with their electrics, so maybe I could play tambourine with them. I couldn't believe it, but to be part of the band, I temporarily went along. I taught myself how to play guitar, but it wasn't rock and roll that I came to like the most. It was folk music from people like Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Pete Seeger, Tom Rush, and many others that inspired me. My rejection from the in crowd actually led to my becoming more independent and later a songwriter. I came to realize that I had things to say and that I wasn't going to be satisfied with just being a good performer. And that's the story of how I got enough money to buy my first dinky little guitar. Although I was rejected from the in crowd, I later started writing my own songs, and I've been writing songs ever since. This is a song I wrote many years later about that experience of growing up when the Beatles came to the United States. So I think I'll play that for you right now. It's called 30 Long Years and More.
I was 12, the Beatles were hot. We'd sing their songs, they said, Dave, you've got to stop. But I've been singing 30 long years and more. They stopped singing a long time ago, but I'm still singing, got plenty more to go, and I'm still singing 30 long years and more. If anyone should tell you to stop singing your song, just ask them kindly to move it on along, and you'll be singing 30 long years and more. Well, they might throw you the ugliest look, strut right off with their nose stuck up, but you'll be singing 30 long years and more. Don't know where this song is taking me to, but I know what this singing has brought me through, and I've been singing 30 long years and more. And always be true to your song, and you'll always be where you belong, and you'll be singing 30 long years and more. And always be true to your song, and you'll always be where you belong, and you'll be singing 30 long years and more. And you'll be singing 30 long years and more.
Yep, If you're true to your song, you'll be singing 30 long years and more. This is the Fresh Toones Music Show, and today's theme is telling our story, and I'm sharing a few of my stories. This next story has some dramatic moments. It was when I almost drowned in Mendon Ponds. My dad eventually grabbed me by my hair and yanked me up to the surface, but that wasn't the end of all the drama, because later in high school I had a flashback to that moment when I almost drowned. There's a pretty interesting story connect there from when I was very young and later when I was in my first year of high school. This story is called Splishin' and Splashin' My Way to Aquaphobia. It's a story based on my memories of when I was 7 and later when I was 13 years old in 1959 and later in 1965. It was a hot summer day in 1959. I was 7 and my family was on its way to Mendon Ponds for a fun-filled afternoon of swimming and picnicking. It was my first time to the pond, and I would be baptized into a new ritual of playing in murky water beset with seaweed, actually pondweeds. When we arrived, the beach was packed with hardly any room to lay down our towels. We peeled off our top clothes to get down to our swimsuits. Before going into the water, my father gave my 2 sisters, 12 and 15, clear instructions not to take me in water higher than my shoulders. Not that deep for a kid 7 years old. They both agreed, and we went running into the crowded water for one of my first community swims. My older sister, Carol, went right out into the deep water to swim and flirt with the teenage boys who were out there horsing around. My other sister, Janet, stayed with me, and she sat down in the water while I splashed around, sitting in my old inner tube. Once in a while I had to flick off some pondweeds, but most of me was out of the water, so I didn't care. The cool water had a stimulating effect on my kidneys, and as I sat there with my butt hanging down through the middle of the tube, I felt an urgent need to pee. I looked at the distant bathrooms far up on the beach and then began to look around with eyes shifting back and forth to make sure no one was watching. I began to relieve myself. I closed my eyes and gave a big sigh of relief as the pressure decreased. When I opened my eyes, I saw an older kid sitting in a tube not too far away with a big smile on his face, like he knew what I had just done, and gave me the old thumbs up. I looked away like I didn't notice him, but I felt like my secret was out. Just then my sister Janet asked me if I wanted to go out a little further and said we could only go up to my shoulders. I saw no reason for concern, so I got out of the tube and we walked out a ways. Once the water was up to my shoulders, she hoisted me back into the tube. We were playing around and she was spinning me in the tube, and we were both laughing when my older sister came over to us. She had become annoyed with one of the boys in the deeper water and wanted to get away from him. My 2 sisters started pushing me back and forth between them as I was splashing with my legs and arms, and we were all laughing. One of the annoying boys came at us swimming underwater and then came flying up next to my older sister to try to scare her. She got angry at him and chased him away. We went back to our play, and before we realized it, we were out in the water above my sister's shoulders. They were bobbing up and down just to catch a breath when my sister Janet said, "We had better move in towards the shore." At that very moment that she finished her sentence, the aggravating teen came flying up from under the water below me and tipped me over backwards from the inner tube. Nothing in my life up to that point had ever changed as quickly from laughter to total panic. As I headed to the bottom, I was kind of surprised that I also sank into a peaceful state as I observed everything floating around me. There sure was a lot of mud being stirred up as people above me frantically tried to grab and pull me up, but I kept my eyes open for some reason. I don't know why, but I never thought of standing up, so I just sat there quietly on the bottom. I was enjoying the view as the weeds slowly undulated from all the turmoil up above. The water seemed to have a yellowish tint to it, and with the sun shining through from above, it had a golden aura. As I was enjoying the view, someone grasped my hair and yanked me up to the surface. With a sudden jerk, I realized I hadn't been breathing, and I took a big gulp of yellow, muddy water on my way up. It was my father who had found me, and I was spitting up water as he carried me to the beach with a number of none-too-happy glances at my sisters. My mom wrapped me in a towel and hugged me. From the panicked look on my parents' faces, it dawned on me how serious this incident really was, and I never liked being in deep water after that. It was 6 years later, and I was starting 8th grade at Monroe High. I wasn't at all happy about it, but I figured if I could just lay low, I might be able to survive the whole high school experience without too much psychological damage. It was our first day in gym class, and Coach Caldwell, our gym instructor and coach of varsity football, yelled at us to strip down and hit the showers before entering the pool. A couple of kids asked where to get their swim trunks, but he just laughed and said, "It's all natural here, son. We swim in the nude, so get your butts moving." I thought to myself, I didn't sign up for this. But once again I could hear him accosting another kid who wasn't moving fast enough, and he was heading this way. Once we were in the pool area, Coach Caldwell, who had one good eye and a scary scar surrounding his glass eye, let out a command that frightened and befuddled most of us 13-year-olds. "Everybody line up on the edge of the deep end of the pool." We were surrounded by white towel from floor to ceiling, so every command from his bellicose voice reverberated off of it and right through us. He marched around with his clipboard in hand, and if we hadn't known better, we would have thought that we had just joined the Marines. He might well have been a Marine, because the commands just kept coming. "Stand at attention while I call attendance." Here we all were on our first day of gym class, shaking like leaves, standing on cold tiles with our manliness hardly visible, and this guy is playing drill sergeant. This was not going to be a pleasant 5 years of high school. When we had been commanded to line up on the edge of the deep end, I had rushed to get as close to the rope at the 6-foot depth as possible. I had never learned how to swim, and I had had a fear of deep water since the age of 7. Positioning myself next to the red rope turned out to be the worst place to be, because he started with me. "All right, Puls, jump in the pool." I hesitated and looked down the line of classmates for help. I didn't sense any support, so the next time he shouted his orders at me to jump, I did. I went right to the bottom and just crouched there. It was déjà vu, and a peaceful calm came over me, even as I could hear a panicked coach yelling at me to stand up and get to the surface. I wasn't responding, and he was totally losing it. I stayed there at the bottom of the pool for what seemed many minutes, but in reality it was probably less than a minute. I finally pushed up with my legs, and with a little chlorine water in my lungs, I grabbed onto the side of the pool. Coach was angry and frustrated and declared, "That's it for today. Everybody in the shower and get your butts to lunch." There were a lot of relieved classmates after I broke up gym class that day, and we never had a similar experience with Coach Caldwell after that. Yes, Coach Caldwell was one tough cookie. He never did have us line up and tell us to jump in the pool again, so I guess I won that battle for my classmates. An interesting side story with my relationship with Coach Caldwell was that 3 years later, he was the coach of varsity football, and I went out to join the team. He always had this beady side look at me like, I don't like working with that kid. A lot of the way through high school, I had to just convince myself that things will be better soon, just hang in there. And this is a song I wrote many years later called Things Will Be Better Soon.
Things will be better soon. Things will be better soon. Ooh. Honey, things will be better soon. I bumped into a preacher who told me one day we'd all be in heaven. Says up there they even got motel rooms that you can sleep in up past 11. So things will be better soon. Things will be better soon. Ooh. Honey, things will be better soon. I met a scientist who gave me some good advice. Told me if I wanted to understand happiness, I should study the behavior of little white mice. So things will be better soon. Things will be better soon. Ooh, honey, things will be better soon. I asked a friend how my future fared with the stars. She said, everything looks just great if you should ever live past March. So things will be better soon. Things will be better soon. Ooh, honey, things will be better soon. Walking home assured everything was gonna get better, only to find everything gone except your letter that said things will be better soon. Things will be better soon. Ooh, honey, things will be better soon. Things will be better soon. Things will be better soon. Ooh, honey, things will be better soon.
And that's it for the Fresh Tunes Music Show today. I hope I've inspired some folks to maybe want to write their own song or write their own stories. Even if it's in an attitude of, who the dickens is that guy? I could write something better than that. Go for it. Enjoy yourself. Have a good time. And have a great week. So long now.
Tell me your story for your